that for Toronto, this is definitely one of their worst years in recent memory, and they weren't even able to hang on to that pick, and that was a result of the Jakob Poeltl trade that we saw, I
Mhm.
think, last season. So they took a hit from that for sure. In hindsight, it doesn't look like the best trade. But for San Antonio's perspective, 2 top 8 picks to help kind of surround Wemby with more talent is definitely something that I'm sure they're looking forward to. And depending on who they select in this draft, those 2 players can be really good complements for Wemby and kind of help that team make a push up the standings sooner rather than later, since they have a guy like Wemby
Yeah.
to kind of take them to the next level.
Yeah, and you got options with it too. Like you could keep one, trade one, or you could even trade both to go get, a veteran all-star or someone to, expedite this process with Wembanyama. Personally, that's not what I would want to do. Just stuff of,
Yeah.
thinking about it for the past few hours. But I mean, there's just there's just a lot on the table for San Antonio. And if you look at it from Toronto's perspective also, it was roughly like a 50-50 split, that like whether or not they were going to keep the
Yeah.
pick. So like, yeah, it sucks, but I mean, you should be I'm the front it shouldn't be a surprise to the front office that it like went this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have their contingency plans laid out, and they're going to trust their process, follow the course that they have in place. And honestly, there are some benefits that I see with having this pick get swiped from them this year rather than next, because
Yeah.
that was the contingency. So now they'll have those protections lifted for next year.
Yeah.
But you got to remember that they just kind of redid their roster in the middle of the year this year by trading away Pascal and OG. So I'm sure there's still some growing pains that they have to work through with their roster, and with their tools that they have in free agency, whether it be the Pascal trade exception, their non-tax mid level. They have some good tradable salary on the books between an expiring Chris Boucher. It's about 11 million. Bruce Brown salary. That's, a good chunk of change and movable, like teams will call.
Oh, yeah.
So it almost gives them more time to figure out what they really want their identity to be, and then to go and draft a player next year, which I imagine will also be pretty like a top pick
Right.
that fits more of that identity, because rather than still being a little murky as to what they want their culture to look like and what they want their true identity to be on the floor, we can squash all those problems. We can get all of that sorted this off season, and then draft a player who fits it like a glove next year. So
Yep.
yeah, it's it sucks to see it go this year. And you also got to remember they have one later in the first round too, I believe. So
Yeah.
it's the headlines will be that they lost their pick, but I really don't think it's the end of the world.
It's really not. And you brought up a good point as well, as far as this draft versus next year. Next year, there are some players that are more of that surefire type of player that I'm sure that the Raptors would like to incorporate into their new core, their new foundation. This year, it's kind of like it's a so-so class, not really looked at very highly. So for them, it's like, hey, it's better this year than next year, because if they lost their pick next year, it actually might end up hurting them more. So definitely something to keep in mind. It's not all as bad as it was made out to be, or it's probably going to be made out to be if you just go take a look at the headlines from today. So definitely a good point on that.